Cities continually change. Lime Street Station in Liverpool, one of the first major stations in the world, is currently being redeveloped. A new concourse, ticket office and modern facilities to open for the Garden Festival to be held in Liverpool in 1984. A long overdue new image for a once distinguished but somewhat tired station. The problem of what to do with Lime Street Station has always been the North Western Hotel. Redevelopment is a complex problem and need not involve demolition, which was the simplistic answer in the 1960s. This programme's called A Trailer for the Future, and to enjoy the future, or even begin to understand what it might be, we've got to understand and enjoy the past. This is the old North Western Hotel behind Liverpool Lime Street Station, and it hasn't been used for 30 or 40 years. They were going to pull it down about 10 years ago and have an office block here. Thank goodness they didn't. It is in fact a listed building, and there was an inquiry, a public inquiry, which stopped it being pulled down. And in fact, it's being redeveloped. That's the good news. It is in fact a building by Alfred Waterhouse, built about 100 years ago, and you can see the pleasure and joy in it in all its details. The good strap work, an interesting fireplace down below with a very ingenious flue that comes underneath the stair and rises up the building. And this stair goes up through 5 or 6 floors, granite columns, an interesting light over there that will eventually have a spherical top to it. Interesting detail all over the show. Buildings like this will get reused. It's going to require a lot of effort. Well, you might ask why this wasn't done before. Well, British Rail certainly didn't know what to do with the building, and conventional institutions wouldn't tackle a building like this. And what's happening now is central government and local government are giving quite big grants, inner city partnership money, and it tops up private capital. And in fact, a firm called Merseypride Developments are taking this on, and they're going to build some very interesting flats. They will have remarkable interiors with very fine views. See, this window's still working. Now, this must be one of the finest views in Liverpool. St George's Hall, the Art Gallery, Wellington on his monument at the end. And down there, another of Waterhouse's buildings. He built buildings all over England. Very successful architect, the most successful architect in the Victorian era for 20 years. And that's a happy little building down there, because there's been some very interesting things done to it. It was empty like this was, and it's just beginning to take off. It's being done up. There's offices there, solicitors, little shops, and a restaurant and pub. And it's the sort of thing that these buildings need. Very interesting little thing. Go and have a look at it. I'm entering the basement of this building, which Alfred Waterhouse would have been quite surprised by, because it's changed completely. It's in fact the entrance to a discotheque. Alfred Waterhouse, if he'd been a designer now, would no doubt have been designing flashing lights like this and doing it with enthusiasm and skill. The important thing we have to remember is that the insides of these buildings can be reinterpreted and changed quite freely. The outside should be left alone because they're listed and because they're part of the history of the city, part of the fabric, but the insides can change continually. Let's have a look at what's happening inside here. They're just finishing the fitting out here. This is interior design, not architecture. Architectural interiors, when they relate to the original building, and particularly relate to the exterior, are what makes a total piece of architecture. Interior design can be anywhere. In fact, we could be on the moon, really. It could be inside a ship. It's enjoyable. It's easy to do. Mirrors, wallpaper, a few fancy materials, you know, new colours, things of this kind. But not really as architectural as some things can be. Now, this building is sitting in a part of Liverpool that was cleared, demolished a few years ago, and around this building are a number of sites that are ripe for development. Development on a fairly small scale, and I think it will be interesting if this sort of energy and commitment could be backed up by other small developments. We've just been looking at this building from Lime Street Station. This is Waterhouse's Pearl Assurance, a beautiful front, turrets, splendid. At the back, unfortunately, is one of the ugliest bits of Liverpool. It was never meant to be seen. It used to have buildings here in Queen Square where the fruit market used to be. And we've got the remnants of the civic centre proposals, the bridges and buildings that really need to be knocked down and thrown away, leaving a few buildings which have some charm and some use, and a massive space which is at present filled with cars and the backs of buildings which shouldn't be seen in that way. It's insulting, really, to have a building like that. So what we need is some new ideas. And here we are again, Pandora's box. We've got Liverpool City Development Trust. And what we want to do is see what we've got inside here. There's a struggle to get these ideas going, but once they do get going, all sorts of things could happen. Look at this. Now, aren't they tremendous? I mean, there we are, licorice allsorts. And the whole point about allsorts is that if the city, remember, the city owns the freehold of this, wanted to encourage the Development Trust, which is a trust, which means it's not a profit-making organisation, it would reinvest the profit in this area. And what they could do is let people have pieces of freehold and encourage them to build buildings. I'll just put some here to give you some idea of the scale. 3, 4-storey high buildings. I don't know what they would be. There should be no planning restriction. You should be able to do anything. Live here. I mean, the fruit market used to be here, so we could have greenhouses on it if we wanted, and you could buy fruit, literally, from the greenhouse, as they have in Covent Garden. And you would have pubs and restaurants and offices and, you know, places to play bands and Punch and Judy shows, and it would tie in with the city park we talked about at another time, and the whole thing would be about what people want, not what institutions want, or planning or Ravenseth Development want with a huge big shopping centre which nobody really likes because it's impersonal, but it would be what they themselves. I mean, architecture you can eat. I mean, it would be, I mean, that ought to be possible actually, in some ways. And what we could say here is that the development strategy should be one of freedom. That what we should have is not the restrictive process of planning, but one where we all get involved, where the management structure is one that gets institutional and government funding, because there's lots of money for inner cities just now. The government gives money away to people with initiative, and what it should do is encourage this to be developed in a way that's totally fresh, because we need new management structures. And if the cities are to survive, and cities like Liverpool face enormous problems, not only politically, but structurally in terms of the age of the fabric, how are we going to renovate these areas? How are we going to stop this being an ugly building for years? Well, what we're going to do is build something on the back of it and create a little square in front. We could call it Waterhouse Square or Queen's Square. And we're going to make people, if they can take the opportunity, enjoy these spaces, build things against the ugly structures. But my goodness, we have built some ugly ones in the modern movement. That's a pig. And this bit here is one of the ugliest pieces of Liverpool at present, and it needs to be repaired. It needs to be repaired with care, enthusiasm, affection, commitment. And in order to make that happen, the city is to sell the freehold very cheaply. And if it will sell the freehold, people will invest. Liverpool's got plenty of freeholds. It wants to encourage things to happen. And this is one of the ways it could. And I'm pontificating a bit too much. I want to eat another of these. And I've decided that the crew are looking a little bit hungry, so here are some of these. Could be good fun. There's one that way, there we are. I always used to like these little blue ones when I was a lad. I'm going to stop rabbiting now. And if you ask me, if the city sold pieces of freehold cheaply, who would do the development? Well, people with small businesses in Liverpool would. People like myself. 5 years ago, this in fact was a derelict warehouse with a rotting roof. It was a banana warehouse, which was completely empty and disused, and it was for sale quite cheaply, freehold. And it's now fully redeveloped, cast iron structure, old brick walls, irregular floors, which we had to level, new services inside, and it's used by the local theatre. The Playhouse have a rehearsal room on the top floor. This is an architect's office, Dave Backhouse, who's very busy and got some interesting things I want to talk to you in a minute or two about. It's got an insurance agent at the back. The Playhouse dressing room and wardrobe storage is on the first floor. There's been a restaurant in it that went bankrupt that cost us a lot of money. In fact, it's not all beer and Skittles. You lose money as well as make money in things like this. And there's an extension to the local pub, the Grapes, and it's in use. And the nice thing is it did incidentally create some other businesses. And this is a very important thing, that when you do a building like this, other things grow from it. A skip hire firm started on the strength of demolitions from this job, and also a local builder who now employs 20 people got going on this job, because I took him on as foreman, and I did it direct labour, which is the only way I could do it because I didn't have any grants on this. If I'd have done this building now, I'd have been given a lot of public money. At the time, a lot of people might have thought I would fall flat on my face, in fact slip on a banana skin. Remember, it was a banana warehouse. This is here's a bit of celebration. Now, the nice thing, too, about these buildings is they get used by people who are inventive, and Dave Backhouse is an architect who looks for opportunities. This is Matthew Street. We've got the Beatles, Penny Lane. The tourists come by the 100 asking, where was the cavern? And, in fact, there is a proposal to recreate the cavern. Dave, incidentally, as an architect, is also a potter, and he makes very interesting commemorative plaques and so on, but he makes pottery models. Now, look at this here. This is a client impressor, if ever I saw one. In fact, the developers, the Royal Insurance, must have been persuaded slightly by this. At least they were dealing with an artist architect. This is nice enough to kind of stroke. I'd expect it to purr or something like that. This is his idea for Matthew Street. And in fact, it did change a little. And the model over here describes the development of the design. Now, one of the reasons we've come here is that this is quite like Waterhouse. In fact, the detail, the terracotta on it, the arches, the kind of mixture of architectural forms, the sheer exuberance of it is almost Victorian. It's commercial, it's got 2 levels of shopping in it, it's got the cavern, it's got a pub, it's got offices above where the building gets narrower. And the nice thing is, and this is one of the reasons why Dave's office is here, because this was originally my office, and Dave came in because he was, in fact, he offered us a very good rental, and I moved back to another office, and he's in fact doing the building opposite, and from this floor we can see literally 50 feet away the corner of this building. It's in fact this corner. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some hard hats on because safety must be looked for, and we're going to go on site and have a look at a magnificent central space that rises right through the building. And I'm going to tell you about a clock. The clue is it's yellow. This, of course, is one of the most famous streets in Liverpool. It, in fact, is where the cavern was, and people come from all over the world to see it. They want to know where the Beatles played, and it's well, a very happy area where restaurants are opening, where shops are beginning to appear. It's like a mini Covent Garden. And it's interesting that the small buildings which have been repaired have encouraged a big building to appear. And the Royal Insurance, who have put the money where their mouth is by building this massive complex, have in fact been encouraged by lots of other little buildings being done. And those buildings will increase in value substantially because of this massive investment. And that's quite appropriate because, you know, big fish have little fish swimming by them. Nothing wrong with that. It's one of the ways that cities redevelop. It's interesting to come up here because we get views of Liverpool that, you know, I've not seen before. And you can see here, if we can go up to the top now fairly quickly and across to the atrium, we could see the central space in this building, which is really quite a different, almost American type of space. Because in the States, they have these shopping centres, which in fact have spaces in the middle in which there are shops on several levels. This one has shopping on 2 levels, but it has a space up the middle that's about 7 stories high with the offices looking down into it. And these offices, in fact, will look into this central space. And I've had a very interesting little commission, actually. I was asked if I could put forward some idea for a clock. Now, the nice thing about a building like this is it's so unusual, it really needs an unusual solution. And we don't want just a clock. So I've come up with an idea that what we should have is, in fact, a yellow submarine. And the yellow submarine would, in fact, rise up on wires. It would be about 15 or 20 feet long, and it would just rise up ever so slowly and move up once an hour, and it would just go up and move around. So if you're in your office, suddenly this submarine would go floating by very, very slowly, make your meeting a little bit more interesting. And up it would go, and as it got higher, in the bottom of the submarine here, you'd see a digital clock. And it would have the date and the time and the temperature, and it would be a happy little thing, and it would be something that would really live in this space, which is down here. It would be like a fish in an enormous bowl. And I hope they do that clock, because it's just the sort of thing the Beatles would have liked. I remember enjoying The Yellow Submarine as a film. It was the happiest film, and it's something that appealed to children of all ages, and I think I'm one of them. Throughout history, some of the best architecture has been based on illusion, and some of the best architecture turns up in the most unexpected places. This is one of them, downtown Birkenhead, underneath the arches, underneath the tunnel access flyovers, which in fact create pieces of land, no man's land, that nobody knows what to do, created mainly by traffic engineers and the motor car, the curse of our age. It's interesting too how the perception of the owners of this building ends here on the corner of the front elevation. They've forgotten the side, which is in fact very visible from all these motorways, and it could be a better advert for the building. But the good advert for the building are things like this planting here. They've obviously cared about it, and I think we should have more planting on building, a lot more planting that people like, because ordinary people like plants. Inside is what I've come here to see, and I want to take us inside now. Isn't the colour of this drink in the glass lovely? And look how the shape of this echoes the shape of that light fitting, blue again. I've got a blue shirt on, which I had on with my other suit, and I've changed to a dress suit because I feel the mood of this interior requires a different mood of dressing. And architecture, just like dress or food or drink, is all about mood. It's to do with your attitude to it, not its attitude to you, because it's inanimate. It isn't going to change. You can change it by your attitude to it, or by the people who have the building and how they interpret it, whether they do the right thing with the lighting, whether the drinks are good, whether the drinks are the right colour, whether the piano's mechanical behind. You can do the play it again Sam routine here, because you press a button and this just plays to you. So it is the architecture of escapism. Quite remarkable and fun. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be. And the whole interior, really, remember, outside is Birkenhead, and here we are in a totally different world. And it'll date very quickly. That doesn't matter, because it can get changed very easily. But it is quite remarkable, very special. Now, this is pure Las Vegas. The mirrors, the glitter, the extravagance, almost the vulgarity. And it's interesting to reflect on the fact that Las Vegas is based on the energy produced by the Boulder Dam, one of the 7 wonders of the modern world, all that energy. And it's the ultimate architectural experience, because what you do is you cross the desert, 200 miles of total blackness. It's like driving across Ireland with no lights on, and then across the Irish Sea without a single boat on it, and then you arrive at something 3 times as big as Blackpool. Makes Blackpool illumination look like beginners. It's an amazing experience. I do think all architects and designers should go to Las Vegas at least once in their working life. We started the programme by saying we had to look to the past before we could design for the present. This interior reminds us that we've got to think of the future and anticipate the future before we can design for the present in certain building uses. Remember, Waterhouse, with the Victorian architect, used Gothic forms, cathedrals, things of that kind, to reassure you that all his buildings were relevant and reliable and trustworthy. Here, the imagery is space-age technology. What we've got is lights that look like they're out of operating theatres. It's pure science fiction. It's also quite remarkable in the way it accepts things from an existing building, like columns, which they've put mirrors round, which, if I was lecturing students on how to design a good building, I'd say never put columns in the middle of a dance floor. And yet you can get away with it, because people do dance around them. They see themselves in it, they see other people reflected in it, the lights reflect in it. The point is, really, this is a social building, and the mirrors actually mirroring people are all about the mood of this building. It's a place to see and be seen. You come here hoping to be asked to dance. You don't want not to enjoy the space itself. So it's really a very clever interior. It's very sombre just now, in fact, very, well, one wonders what's going to happen. I'm not really sure myself. Looking at this, I can see that as an interior, it's very 1983. In 2 or 3 years, it will be out of date. In 5 or 10 years, people will be doing things with walls like this and floors like this even. I could imagine a space. And let's always remember that architecture will surprise you at some stage in future. We haven't said everything so far. It would be foolish to imagine that the past knows how to do it better than the future. It doesn't. The past is the past, and what we're to do is enjoy that for what it is and make sure that modern design and whatever we do in future is better than the past. It doesn't have to be worse. It's a question of money, expense, skill. It's a question of the people demanding that it should be good. And let's go back to this one and just imagine in the future, at some stage, a 3-dimensional thing. Imagine the difference between 2-dimensional chess and 3-dimensional chess. And I'm telling you that at some stage in the future, there will be this sort of interior in 3 dimensions, probably in space somewhere. You'll be floating around in, you know, free fall gravity dancing around. And I think the important thing here is that the architecture wins. And good design always does, and it comes through. And what you've got to do is you've got to go looking for it. And I know I can recognise it because, remember, I'm lucky. I'm lucky at pontificating to you and telling you about it, because this is what I'm paid to do. It's what I enjoy doing, because I do care about the environment. And by the way, the British don't enough. We're a visually illiterate race. We're better at words, we're better play. We have good architects, but perhaps they're under-recognised, that's another matter. And I'm advertising architecture here. It's one of the reasons I want to be here. Employ a good architect if you want good buildings. Spend more money, perhaps build fewer buildings, but my goodness, get involved in the process and care. Value the older buildings and come to the other buildings like this that are really worth coming to and have a good time. Because that's what we've done on this series. I've really enjoyed myself. I've been indulged. I've been very fortunate. I'm a very lucky fella. Let's let the architecture do the work. I've done enough talking.
I met this guy, and he looked like he might have been a hat check clerk at an ice rink. which in fact, he turned out to be. And I said,
Oh boy, right again. Let X equal X.
you know, it could be you. It's a sky blue sky. Satellites are out tonight.
Let X equal X.
You know, I could write a book, and this book would be thick enough to stun an ox. Because I can see the future, and it's a place about 70 miles east of here, where it's lighter. Linger on over here. Got the time?